Greg Lunt, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, sir.
Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Of course, anytime. I appreciate you having me.
Of course. So let's jump right into it. So you've been talking a lot recently about building a cult, and you have a Telegram community with hundreds of creators in there, and you're becoming one of the most influential thought leaders in the space. And you're gaining a lot of notoriety, and people are talking about you a lot within the X community. So my question to you to start off with is, how do you not let all of this influence and external success get to your head?
Yeah, I mean, it probably does a little bit, but I just don't think I'm that great ultimately. Like I think that I've worked really hard. I think I have a unique perspective that it's the thing is that it's not like coming from me, it's coming from the work. So I understand I'm humble in that way where I just understand that anyone can dedicate the time and the energy into something that they believe in, and then over a period of months and years start to build up some sort of expertise or credibility. And I'm just putting that into practice now, and people are like, oh, that's like resonating with me. And I'm just like, yeah, like, well, it took me 5 years or 6 years to kind of, or even longer with some things, to kind of build up that skill set. And so I don't look at it as like, oh, I'm so great. It's just like, yeah, I put in the work and now it's paying off a little bit. But I also realize that I'm such a small fish, and it's like, I appreciate the kind words of you saying like I have notoriety and stuff, but really, like, I have sub 30K followers. Like there's accounts that 100,000, 500,000, millions of people. I'm not reaching like that many people in the scheme of things. So I keep myself in check, just looking at a lot of the bigger creators that I admire that are way ahead of me. And it's like, I have so much work to do. So yeah, I mean, I don't really, I mean, there's some days when you feel cool or whatever, when you have a viral post or you get a lot of good feedback, but most of the time I'm pretty underwhelmed with where I'm at overall.
I feel the same way. Like compared to where I was at a year ago, I would have given anything to like have 20,000 followers, be launching a cohort and stuff, but you realize it's really just the first step on a very long journey. But I would say like even though you are below 30K followers, those 30K followers you have are extremely invested in you, and they're extremely interested in your message, and they listen to everything you say. And this kind of comes to the point of building a cult. So I want to know how you think about this word, the cult, as opposed to building an audience or building a community. What separates those two things?
Yeah, so this is something I've really only been thinking about for maybe like probably under a month now. And it was really introduced to me by Atlas, Dentist Leo on X, who's become a good friend. And he just looks at it like the way he described it on my podcast was, there's a few things that make up a cult. Number one is that you basically have an ideology or a belief system that people are willing to invest in and have a shared belief around something. Secondly, that you have a common enemy. So you basically, it's like us against the world. We know something they don't know. And so it brings people together around that. And then you have a charismatic leader that can essentially embody the ideology, because people don't like rally around an idea. You can agree on an idea, but you don't rally around that. You need something more tangible. And in this case, a human being is really someone that allows that idea to kind of be a physical thing, something that people can like all understand and relate to. And so I'm trying to be that. It kind of happened organically at first, but now I'm being more intentional about using the word cult. And it's funny because I'm starting to write tweets about it and compare cult and community, where like community is a little more about having a shared interest, and cult is about having like a shared ideology, and it just runs so much deeper. And that's how you create real movements, is people that are invested in something that's like a belief system. And of course, the word cult has negative connotations when it comes to sex and manipulation and drinking the poison at the end and everyone dies and all that stuff. But if you look up the definition of cult, it doesn't necessarily have to do with manipulation. It has to do with more rallying around a charismatic leader and an ideology. And so I think, there are certain aspects where people use it like, oh, it's a cult classic, right? It's like there's nothing wrong with like liking a movie that like there's a small group of people like rally around and the ideas in that movie. Or Even just the word culture. It's like we are fine relating humans to being a culture. That's the same etymology. So it's this like mission to almost redefine the word. And also, I'm working on the common enemy part of it. And I think the meta common enemy, it'll probably get narrowed down over time. But right now, what I'm working on is like maybe it's just going against the idea of community because everyone's saying don't build followers, build fans, or don't build an audience, build a community. And so that's becoming a bit trite. So it's like, how do we take that even further where I can actually be different? And it's like, fuck a community. That's weak and pathetic. That's just a bunch of people with shared interests. Why not build a cult where you can actually like lead a movement based on powerful ideas?
That's a fascinating take. And as you were talking, a couple names came to mind who people who probably have cult like followings, good or bad. So, like, first one that comes to mind is Andrew Tate. Like, he's got that cult like following. And I'd say his common enemy is like the Matrix, escaping the Matrix. And you have a really positive example, like, there's Huberman cult like fans, right? Like into biohacking and health. But then in the other end of the spectrum, you could say like Hitler was also a cult leader. So I think that distinction is like, what are you leading people towards? So for you, and I know it's still in its early phases of your cult or how you're thinking about this, but what is that thing you want to lead your followers towards?
Well, I'm really about so it starts with myself. Like when you think about let's back up a little bit and think about like a business. People say like the best business ideas or the best motivations for business is like solving your own problem, right? Because then you can relate to it and then you understand who your target audience is and you can speak to them. You can speak to your past self. You can do all these things that's in a more relatable format. So for me, it's like, well, what problem am I really trying to solve in my life? Or why would I join? Like, what's an ideology that I really relate to and I'm passionate about. And that's like building a life of freedom. And I know that that's become a bit trite. There's time freedom and location freedom and financial freedom. And there's also like mental freedom. And you and I talked about this offline. But like, I think one of the biggest breakthroughs for me in my life has been this separation between my thoughts and myself. And when people say things like, um, I can't believe, or like, I've like Eckhart Tolle, for example, said like, I cannot live with myself any longer. Like someone who is, depressed or something like that. Or like, there's an I and there's a myself. It's like, how are there two different beings in that statement, in that moment? And people don't understand that. They don't separate themselves from the stories that they're telling themselves in their head. And so it puts this cage around them. And even if they had all of those other freedoms that I mentioned in the physical world, the time, the location, the finances, there's this internal freedom that people lack and they're striving for, or they don't even actually know that they can strive for. Some people, I think the awareness levels are definitely rising over the last few years with people like understanding the present moment and tapping into more of like a conscious energy and this emphasis on meditation. And people are getting there slowly but surely. But I want to kind of bring all of that together and help people understand like you can free yourself from your mind, you can free yourself by becoming part of this creator economy. You can free yourself by forming a cult of people that believe the same things as you do. And that will allow you to like basically do anything you want. It falls under like this personal brand narrative that a lot of us understand and are passionate about and are bullish on to be able to sell things online to people that you know how to serve. And you can do that anywhere, anytime. So it's this combination of like this real world freedom, this tangible freedom, but then also this mental freedom. And I really want to bring that together and help people.
I love that. I'm excited to see where you take this vision. And it almost sounds like there's a little bit of a spiritual component to that too. It's like beyond the physical freedom. It's like this spiritual freedom. And I know the power of now had a huge influence on you. And I think if somebody found your account right now and found your content, I don't know if they would get that vibe that you're into the spiritual stuff. So do you think that's a topic you might start to incorporate more as you go forward? Or how do you see that playing out?
It's definitely possible. It's funny. I did a space yesterday with a couple of creators, Francesca and Jazz, and they were interviewing me and it got pretty deep. And they were a little surprised. They were like, "Oh, I didn't realize like you had this depth to you in the way that you think
Yeah.
about things." And I'm actually okay with that. When I end up getting into smaller conversations, particularly in spaces when I congregate with members of my community, whether it's a more formal interview like we had last night, or if I'm just hosting and it's just 5, 10, 20 people in there, it's not one of those big rooms. Sometimes things get like personal and spiritual or vulnerable, whatever you want to call it. And that's like, I don't want to say it's my zone of genius, but that's definitely like somewhere I'm very comfortable, is leaning into like the esoteric and trying to better understand myself and the world around me and where are we going. I think that's a big thing, as well as like people, they say the world is changing fast, but they don't really understand where it's going. And I feel like I have some sort of idea where it's going, because you look at like the internet and blockchain and finance, like you look at how data has basically been made free and accessible to everyone, information through the internet, but value has not done that yet. And we're in the process of that through Web3, Bitcoin, blockchain, all this stuff. So I've studied that for a while. I'm certainly don't consider myself an expert, because I think in order to be an expert, you pretty much have to be like a blockchain developer and coder. But I do have an idea of kind of what's going on. And so combining that, like all the stuff that we've talked about, with kind of more of the tangible stuff, I'm okay not necessarily leading with the spirituality, but because I like when people find out stuff about me later on. So I guess I would say like I'm not hiding it on purpose. I'm happy to talk about it at any time when it arises. Having said that, I like the idea of being more of like a forward brand around like content and around like freedom and the things that I mean, I guess now just saying it out loud, like as I push more towards the freedom stuff, maybe it would be important for me to talk more about it. So you're making me think, because this, like you said, this is very early. I'm kind of in like a transition phase where I'm still the audio guy, but I'm figuring out like how do I level this up? And maybe you're right. Maybe I should talk about it more. Right now, I'm focused on like kind of getting a little more aggressive with my content and doing the more of the cult leader stuff, and maybe even being like a little more narcissistic, kind of like Andrew Tate style. Not Andrew Tate, but like the way that that's an exaggerated version of himself, right? So those are the types of things I'm thinking about, but and the spirituality side feels a little softer, so I have to figure out how to balance that, I guess.
Yeah, I love how you're like coming to new conclusions through conversation. And similar to like what you said about your intimate space with Jazz and Francesca, I've done a couple spaces with Jazz and they always get super deep. That's why I love talking to her. But a common theme I've noticed is like the bigger the group, whether it's in person at a party or whether it's in a space with a couple hundred people, usually the nature of the conversation turns a little bit more shallow and surface level. But when it's a one to one or like a one to a couple, the conversation can get much deeper. And that's why I love doing the podcast one on one, because you can get so much deeper just one to one than if it's one to many. But I think the common theme you mentioned there between whether it's spaces or whether it's podcast is audio. And you're obviously huge in the audio space, maybe the most forward thinking person in terms of audio on X and how important that is. So my question to you is why why do you think more creators aren't going so deep into audio, and what do you think they're missing out on by not leveraging audio more in their brand?
It's a good question. And I think that it's ironic because people talk about video a lot. And I think there's like a lot of narratives that go around, and people get caught up in narratives and not thinking for themselves all the time. And it's like, oh, video is the next wave. Video is the way. Video is the way. And everyone just says it. But it's like, bro, there's science that backs up that audio has a deeper connection with people that listen than video does with people that watch. And like even just that, but like even just the use of it. So from a speaker standpoint, I don't have to set this up with my microphone and get on camera and think about what I'm going to wear and like set the lighting or whatever. I just pop on a space or what. I mean, podcasts, yes, you kind of have to have a video podcast these days to have any chance of traction. But you essentially it's an audio format, right? And so if we're just talking about audio versus video, generally, I can just open a space. I can just record a voice note. I can just, I'm recording audio newsletters now. These are things that you can do without worrying about your appearance and that extra stress and your environment. And then from a listening standpoint, you kind of have more flexibility in terms of not having to dedicate all of your senses to it. You can multitask, you can be on the go. It just requires less attention, but you can still understand. And again, that goes back to the science, which is it was a study out of Yale in 2017 that said that voice only communication elicits higher rates of empathic accuracy than multisense communication. So, in other words, audio only allows you to better understand the message than seeing multisense or video, because you're not as distracted by things like micro movements in the face or body language, and you're honed in on linguistic and paralinguistic cues. So you're just listening to the message of the words. You're not getting distracted by how good looking, how the way their face twitched, whatever it is. Those little things take away from the depth of really understanding what they're saying when all you have is the voice. So I think people aren't moving towards it because they're not as familiar with audio. It's not like something that they've spent a lot of time thinking about and no one's talking about it. And I think that what they're missing out on is a way to much more easily distribute content and much more deeply connect with their audience.
I 100% agree. It's pretty fascinating the extent to which audio can really impact you. And I was talking to a friend about this the other day because he was like, I want to be reading more books. Like he's very early in his entrepreneur stage. He's like 21, trying to start an online business, but he's like, I just never make the time to like sit down and formally read a book. And I was like, dude, you don't even have to sit down and formally read a book. You can listen to a book while you drive. You can listen to a book while you're playing Xbox. You can listen to a book while you're doing the dishes. Like audio, it's so interesting to me because you can almost be listening to something at all times. And I think the really forward thinkers are seeing this already and taking advantage of it. And something that comes to mind is Naval's new app, AirChat, and how it's basically just constant audio. That's the only element of the app. Now, with that, it doesn't seem like it's picked up too much traction. So, have you taken a look at all into AirChat and like how do you see that playing in with, say, Twitter Spaces?
Yeah, I played with that app a little bit. Frankly, I wasn't super impressed. So like I love Naval and I love audio, and I think that audio apps will continue to evolve and something will break through. Right now, Spaces, obviously it's not its own app, was a clone of Clubhouse, which was its own app. That's, this is the leader. Spaces right now is the leader in like audio, social audio. But there's got to be, so I built an app in 2018 that was an audio dating app. So the version that we ended up kind of like launching and running about 20 events in Los Angeles in 2019, the experience was that you would sign in at a certain time. You would get a list of like questions that are like first date questions, funny, smart, flirty, that were hand selected by me. And everyone would choose like 2 or 3 questions from that list, and then the event would start. And I would get automatically paired up with girls, in my case, in my area. And it would just be an open chat. Both of our questions would be at the top of the room in case we needed them, but it would basically be just like an open phone call. And you just have 3 to 5 minutes to start talking. And the connections that people would make would be really organic. And there was no images. It was just voice, right? And then if things slowed down, again, you had questions to kind of be that like kind of that safety net so things didn't get awkward. But what I found, and then after the call was over, after the time ran out, you'd see the other person's picture, and then you would decide if you wanted to match or not. And then you would do that like 5
Ah,
times in a row. So you'd have like a speed dating event where you would meet people through these audio only environments, and people absolutely loved it. There were a few reasons I didn't continue with the app, but these are the types of things I'm looking for. So for example, Clubhouse right now, they rebranded and basically relaunched their product. And what they did was like, it's interesting as a feature kind of, but they made it the whole app. And what they tried to do was recreate the way that groups congregate through audio online. But it's like, bro, you already solved that. Like the stage with the audience and the raising your hands and the sound effect, like the way that a Twitter space or a Clubhouse stage is set up, that's like pretty much the answer. I think someone finally cracked how to let people meet through audio. Now the question is not how do we find other ways for groups to meet in audio. We figured that out. Now it's how do you send them down the funnel to build stronger relationships, whether that's romantic or just general networking based around similar interests, location, whatever it may be, should there be a button on a Twitter space where if there's 100 people in the space, I click a button and then we automatically break out into rooms of 3 or 4 or 5, and it randomizes and it has little games or little question setups so that we, or one-on-one or whatever the number you set. Like, how do we bring people from group meeting environments in audio down into like one-on-one or two-on-two, or game, like just something that gamifies the process in smaller groups or one-on-one. And AirChat doesn't really do that. Again, I only played with it around like once, and I was just kind of like, oh, it just felt like another, like things like that have been tried before, I think, where it just feels like a feed of just audio, where like people don't want to like sit and just click play and like listen. I think the beauty of audio really is like the live audio. When you're doing stuff like that from a social media perspective, I think podcasts are awesome when you go long form, and that's on demand, and that's excellent. And obviously you can do the replay of the live stuff, but we're seeing on Twitter too, like you can create little audio notes from iOS and put it on the feed directly in a tweet. Nobody listens to those, bro. Like, it's just not the way that we experience audio content. So, I'd have to take another look into AirChat. Maybe, like I said, I played with it for maybe 20 minutes, but it felt like an older idea kind of recycled, and it just has like the marketing hype behind it. I'm waiting for somebody to build an app closer to what I described from my dating app, where like I can meet people around Twitter networking or around, entrepreneurship in a certain radius, and just start to connect with people in real time. That seems way more interesting to me.
It does seem super interesting. And I had a similar experience with AirChat. Like, the only reason I would ever go on that app was to find like whatever room Naval was in and just hear him speak, because whatever that guy says, like, I want to hear. He's got so much wisdom. But like, I didn't care to listen to the other people on there for whatever reason. But what you said about your dating app, I actually really love that idea, because after having traveling around and meeting girls in particular from around the world, like sometimes we'll send voice notes to each other, and like hearing them send me a voice note as opposed to sending me a text, it just hits on a deeper level. Like, you can feel it in your body. Like, their voice just resonates with me so much deeper. So I really like that idea. And as you were talking about like you're waiting for somebody to build an app for networking, I was like thinking the same thing. I'm like, why has nobody done this? So you already have experience building a dating app with this concept. You're leading the audio space within this Money X Twitter. Have you thought about building that type of app yourself?
I haven't stopped thinking about it since I
Interesting.
built the app. I tried to relaunch the app a couple times in like 2021. And I don't feel like I'm built to be a tech CEO necessarily. Like, I don't want to raise millions in VC. I don't want to like lead teams of engineers. I don't want to do any of that. I'm like way more chill, like just kind of, I want to create content and get paid for it. I don't want to build an app. Now, would I be willing to work on an app like that? 1,000,000%. But I don't want to like do like the operations and
Mm.
like I would have to have like the perfect role in it. And when I did give up that idea and give up that app, I searched continuously for other people working on audio dating apps, and I offered my help. And I literally went to meet people in person just to share with them what I had built, and how any of it could be of service. But um, I could see myself being involved in something like that in the future. I'm totally open to like, if anyone's listening to this and like is building that and I can help you, like I'm happy to share what I know. But it would need to be like the perfect scenario for me to get involved. And I'm excited for somebody else to kind of take the bull by the horns. I'm very confident that it will happen. And we're moving into a world now where like people keep talking about video, video, video. I'm not so sure. I think that like we're moving into a world that's more like AR and VR. And I know people are like tired of hearing that, but that is on the way. And so there will be visuals, but video will be less important. It'll be more like, what's the environment that I'm in, or how, like in VR, like where am I? And if I'm in there with you, Jack, like you're going to be wearing goggles that are scanning your face in real time. So I'll be there with you. I'm not like watching videos and stuff necessarily. Or even the stuff that is created will probably be some sort of like 3D modeling version of you, even if it is recorded. And then in AR, it's more like I'm just like moving around the world, like adjusting to the world. So audio is going to be a huge part of that. where I'm like giving audio commands to like open things or like play this, play that, like Alexa style interactions with the visuals on top of it. And so video seems like it's almost like too 2D for me, in a world where we're moving into like 4D experiences, where audio has like that 4D element to it. So it just feels like people are missing the mark a little bit. But I would be happy to like, so I guess the point being, I do see that app getting built. Someone will build something where like audio, it takes audio to the next level. Even Twitter right now, they're like talking about adding video to spaces, and I just hope they do it tactfully. Like if a host adds like a little, be able to screen share or something, like I think that could be okay. But if it turned into some like massive Zoom call, it's just going to ruin the whole thing.
Yeah, I like how you're thinking about this because I'm kind of self-reflecting on my own consumption right now. And the times that I actually sit down and like formally watch a YouTube video, I've noticed is decreasing over time, but the times that I'm listening to something is increasing. So it's very interesting. And I saw Lex Friedman and Mark Zuckerberg's podcast like in VR. That was wild. So I'm excited to see where that evolves. But and I'm also excited to see where this idea evolves for you and your role within this because a couple people come to mind. Like J.K. Molina with Tweet Hunter, right? Like he wasn't the guy behind the scenes, like leading the team of engineers building the software, but he was kind of that forward facing personal brand for the business. So if somebody was out there building this audio app, what better person than Greg Lunt to be the face of that, right? And maybe this evolves for you too, because I know for years, Dan Coe, he didn't want to build a startup. He didn't want to be in charge of a team, but now he's evolved to this next stage of his journey where now he has like 15 people working for him at Cortex and he's evolving with that. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out for you. And with that, so I wanted to get a little bit into like the future in terms of crypto and Web3 because you were super deep into that space. And I was researching you before this podcast, looking at your old tweets, and the majority of your most popular tweets were actually all about crypto, which really surprised me. So I'm curious, given your background in crypto, how do you see crypto, Web3, DeFi, all of this stuff impacting the creator economy specifically?
So we're going to be able to get paid, um, and actually like own our communities or our cults or whatever you want to call them, and have that like all tie together in a meaningful way. So this is something that like I'm still formulating my thoughts around, to be honest with you, um, with regards to how it's going to impact like the individual and creators. But when it comes, if we go back to the cult idea, if you're familiar with Balaji Srinivasan and the kind of the network state, there's this idea that like nation states are devised by their physical borders, where you can have something like a network state where people are coming together as communities and countries even online, and going around these ideas similar to the cult idea. And when you can do that and you can attach a certain cryptocurrency to it, now all of a sudden you have like an actual GDP. There's a number, a money number that you can attach to that state, that network state, that country, and then you can start rank ordering it with like smaller countries, around the world. And you can even do so much as to like take these people and everyone can be like, all right, let's all move to this one location. And now, similar to like a Chinatown or a little Italy, you could have like
Yeah.
a louder town or whatever, and you could have like an actual physical location of people that have decided that we're going to have our own like sort of economy that then can do trade and transfer value with other economies and actually be legally recognized as a state or a country. So like for a creator, it's like, man, I could start my own country in theory. And Balaji makes the argument that the network state, that starting new countries is, we've started, gosh, I wish I can remember exactly, but he talks about we've started new currencies, we've started new companies like these, and they rank up. It's like companies, like whatever. It's like, why can't we start new countries? And he makes the argument that it is possible, it's preferable, and it's profitable. And because of all those things, you can start to see a world where cryptocurrency and the ability to have provable value and provable citizenship into certain digital economies can actually rank up against actual countries, get legal recognition, and then have some sort of say so in the direction of the world and the way that humans interact and facilitate trade and productivity. And so as a creator, in theory, you could think outside the box and say, I could literally start a country on a long enough time frame by first building a cult, essentially, of people that believe in my ideas, believe in the direction of the world as I am creating content around it and portraying and embodying that, being that charismatic leader. And if enough people come together and then the technology catches up and I combine the two in a creative way, there's potential there to actually like be a political player in the world. And it doesn't mean you need to do that as a creator, but that could be some of the upside if you attach crypto to the creator economy.
That's fascinating stuff to think about where this could head in 20 to 30 years. And I mean, I think you can see this decentralization happening across all fronts. And one of my big visions is building the personal development school for the creator economy, right? Like I went to a very prestigious university, but I've learned more in a year in the creator economy than I did in the 3 years at that top 10 university. And so I see it kind of playing out that all these creators will have their own schools or their own universities or their own like schools of philosophy, similar to like the ancient Greeks. And I do think I could see the same parallel with like the nation states and the network states, like you said. But my one question on that would be, what makes you think that actual countries and nations like would allow this to happen, right? Like say a group of creators like us, we wanted to start the louder country, for example, right? What makes you think the United States would allow us to potentially renounce that citizenship in some way and join this new digital country?
Yeah, I think so again, like I need to study this more because I'm kind of
Yeah.
like in the early stages of this. That's a great question. I do know that Balaji has kind of touched on that, and I think it probably has to do something with the idea of it being profitable. So if there's a way that like our state can bring value to your state and there's trade to be made, or there's upside for you in recognizing us as a legal entity, like all you really need is like one to start, and then like the floodgates kind of open where it's like this has been recognized, okay, now like all these others will be recognized. Like you see like Bitcoin is legal tender in El Salvador. Like we haven't
Right.
seen the floodgates open just yet, but like that was a massive moment where it's like this digital currency that was just made up on an internet forum is now being recognized as tender in a country that is recognized in the world as, you know, a working political entity. So similarly, like there will be a lot of roadblocks in terms of that, like getting over that hump of like, why would this be allowed? I don't see it. I don't understand it. But there will be people on the front lines that are working to make it happen. And money kind of like trumps all at the end of the day. Like if there's a way for profitable trade or productivity to happen by recognizing this, some country somewhere or some jurisdiction or some, you know, the EU or like some like region will take a shot and they will do something forward thinking to benefit themselves, and then that will open the door for everything to kind of snowball after that.
Yeah, it's super fascinating stuff to think about, and you're bringing to mind the book The Sovereign Individual, and I need to go reread it. It's literally sitting right next to me on my desk. I need to take a deeper dive. But I remember a quote in there. It talks about like in the future, individuals will have the power to choose their own country, and countries will have to treat individual citizens like customers, because in this digital world, why would you not go move to a state where you don't have to pay taxes, where you have more freedom? So I'm optimistic that this could all happen. I also do see a side where states wouldn't want to give up that power. So I'm curious to hear your perspective as we go forward on how this evolves. But I wanted to get a little bit more into your background in terms of crypto. So you were this huge crypto influencer, like one of the biggest in the space. So why did you make the transition from the crypto side of things into this more creator side of things or audio? What was that transition like?
I was bored, number one. Um, the it became like really easy, like a little too easy, where it just felt honestly like it was just a big circle jerk for this token that I was promoting online. It was just like I could literally pretty much post anything with that cash tag in it. I had built enough authority and like trust in that community, and it would just like pop off every time. Like we're talking like 30 retweets and 100 likes in an hour, or it was like a bad post. Completely organic. And every post would go 20 to 100K views. And I had like 10,000 followers, right? And it was just every post was just, and so there was a combination of like, I got bored, just posting the same shit every day. I used to get a lot of energy from doing the deep dive research because this particular token, the way their business model worked, it was a real company like that had a token attached instead of like, this is a token and like we're trying to find a use case. It was like, no, they serve governments, enterprises, big banks. They have like provable partnerships, but they also were under NDA. A lot of these, they were a white label company. So meaning that their technology was being licensed in secret by massive corporations, and 95+% of their partners were not public. And so there would be a lot of like deep dive, like scavenger hunting for like piecing this quote with this video, with this document, and like this framework, this architecture that this company posted. It's like, oh, that kind of looks similar because this and that. So it was a lot of like detective work. And that was where I found a lot of like fulfillment and fun, kind of like piecing things together. But after a while, it just kind of got a little boring. And then there was also drama in the community where like I was a bit more level-headed, I think, than some people, and I was willing to talk about the things that were maybe not as rose-colored glasses. Like, hey, I actually have a question about this, or the token supply, or the company said this, had someone on the back channel, like, what does this mean? And people just would immediately, like some of the more like OGs in the community that would run the Telegram channels, all the community driven stuff, they got really defensive. All these like anonymous guys that like lived in the Netherlands and stuff, and no one knows who they are. I was Greg Lunt with my picture. Everybody else, 99% of the other guys in there were all just completely anonymous, and they would just freak out. They would like, there was a night where I literally stayed up all night and I was getting canceled. I don't know if you've ever had a situation where literally thousands of people you're watching them just trash you in real time in a Telegram group in like hyperspeed, just like literally just throwing you under the bus. It was like, I've
Wow.
probably one or two times in my life I've ever been that like anxiety ridden. And I literally pulled an all-nighter, like just watching it and trying to manage relationships on the back channels. It was very stressful. There were like two situations that happened like that because I brought to light things that were not like the most bullish things ever. And they drew up some questions, which I thought it was my responsibility to do as the most forward facing influencer, was to like say like, hey guys, because I'm telling people like invest in this. And it's like, if I find stuff that's not the best news, does it hurt my bags? Does it hurt like the narrative? Maybe a little bit, but like I found that my responsibility was to my audience. And so some people took that personally, and it just, I got started getting banned from all the Telegram channels, even though I was like the most honest, authentic, and best researcher in the entire community, where 98% of the community had my back. Some of the guys with the power had a lot of ego and they started banning me. And I was just like, I have to deal with this pushback. Like, I'm bored of this anyway. Like, I'm just going to change my content into something that I actually care about and think about every day now, which is, at the time, was self-development, personal growth, mindset. And I started, I basically did a massive intentional rebrand. I built up hype for it, put out a big tweet about it, and immediately just basically shifted my content 100% over to more like stuff that was authentic to me. And then kind of, rolled over the course of a few months, started going, well, actually a few weeks, figured out how to go viral in about 3 or 4 weeks, creating video threads from large creators' YouTube channels. So I would take like Dan Coe or Dickie Bush and Nicholas
Yeah.
Cole conversations, and I would create video threads with like good hooks, with little short 60-second video clips recapping the podcasts and their videos. And then they would start retweeting those. And so I was getting followed by big accounts. I was getting big exposure into MoneyX, which I didn't even know was a thing. And I just started like, okay, now that I'm doing that, I can talk about how to go viral a little bit. And I started sharing like some of the growth hacks I was finding in spaces I was going in there and meeting people, and then sharing a lot of my knowledge. again, I had never given up this idea of like audio was always like really deep in me, and I love talking. And I came up on Clubhouse. That was actually the first place where I started building my brand. So I knew what it was like to talk on a stage and to do that stuff. And so after a while of that, long story short, long story long, I guess, I basically was just like, um, why don't I just flip into social audio? Why don't I niche down even further and just literally talk about spaces and the power of that and how I'm seeing growth through that? So it kind of became like more meta as I went along. But that's kind of like why I switched.
I love two things about that in particular. I admire two main things. So the first is that you were willing to put your face out there within that crypto community, which is all anonymous, right? And like that comes with a big risk because you get canceled, everybody knows it's you, and that comes with massive downsides. But also you get rewarded with so much authority and leverage when it goes well. And I think in the creator space, you're seeing that even more versus like an anonymous account, they can't build that same type of authenticity and leverage. The second thing that came to mind when you were talking is your ability to pivot and turn back down the mountain and climb a different mountain. Naval talks about like all the most successful people are willing to jump ship and come back down to the start of the mountain and start climbing again. Because when we get so attached to one set path, we get this whole sunk cost of all that time. But you were willing to just actually go back to the start. And I think you've done this a lot over your life, like whether it's crypto, whether it's that dating app, it's that ability to start again. So how can somebody cultivate that ability to hit the restart button without feeling that burden of I just wasted a year, 2 years, 30 years of my life?
It's you didn't waste it. It's like the things that I gained from those, like, was there a grieving period every time that I had to give something up or I chose to give something up? Like, of course, it's like, fuck, like, dude, do you know how, like, I was posting once a day and just getting like 50, 100,000 views for just like talking some shit on a token. It was like, and then to just be like, never mind. Like, yeah. And I thought it was going to go well too. I like my first thread I posted, dude, I told you it was like 30 retweets, 100 likes in an hour. That was like the baseline. I got like 15 likes on that first thread. And it was like, I was like shell shocked a little bit. I was like, I knew that my engagement would drop, but like, fuck. And it was like a couple of weeks of just basically some people following, some people unfollowing. Like, it was just like, I couldn't grow. And, the dating app, it was also very sad for me. Like, that was my baby. Like, I spent 2 years on it, 2.5 years on it. 1 year of that was basically just me alone in an apartment, just desperately trying to like find a technical co-founder, like building out resources, networking. Like, I put every fucking thing I had into that. But guess what? Like, look at me now. Like, all that stuff that I was passionate and studied it and practiced it and understood what was going on, I'm now leveraging it. And I didn't like know that was going to happen, but the idea is to follow your energy. Like, if something's not working, it's not a waste of time. It's like all the things that you did, you built that website, you learned how to use that platform, you like launched an LLC, you figured out like some networking hack that you met somebody, you probably literally met 20 people doing that thing. Like, all those things, they compound over time. So even when you find that winning thing that's going to like blow you up, you're probably going to pivot from that at some point too, because you're just going to get tired of it or it's going to expire or whatever the reason is. Most people don't do the whole one thing for their entire life. Almost nobody. And the people that do, they're like bored out of their fucking mind. Like, if you work 60 years at the same company, it's like, did you really live a life that is like optimized or like the most exciting life possible? And I think that's what a lot of us are striving for, creators, is we're trying to push the boundaries a little bit on like what makes for a fulfilled life and how do I live this in a way that I'm proud of and that resonates with me and that is impacting people. And you kind of have to be on the edge for that. And in order to be on the edge, you have to be willing to continually iterate and continually improvise and compartmentalize the fact that what you're doing before that is not a waste. It was an experience that now when you try the new thing, you're better equipped to make that work. And I always had this idea. Everything I worked on, bro, there was probably 5, 6, 10 projects that I worked on over like a 5-year period prior to this. And every single one, I was like, this is the one. I was sure of it. And so I've stopped doing that Even now where I'm like, oh, I'm finally like generating some revenue. I'm making some real connections. I like have an audience, like all the things that it's like, okay, this probably is like the direction of like my one. I like don't even say that to myself because I just know that the power is in the pivot and understanding that you have an opportunity to try out a lot of different things and fail a lot. And that's actually how you succeed.
That's a powerful quote. The power is in the pivot. I'm writing that down. You should tweet that with your story. That would be a great tweet. But no, I resonate so much with it. And Charlie Munger has this quote that comes to mind where he's like, treat your ideas like tools. If you had a better tool, you'd be foolish to not switch and use the better tool. And I think it's the same with like pivoting what you're doing. And I've had very similar experiences, like playing D1 football and then going to a top 10 university expecting to go like the big time investment banking finance route and having to leave those two things. Yeah, in the moment it was very hard and very uncertain, and sometimes people will ask me like, do you wish you would have stayed with that? But no, like that time was not wasted. Everything I learned from football in terms of leadership, discipline, performance, even that all translates to what I'm doing now, studying psychology at Northwestern where I went. That wasn't wasted, right? I'm transferring a lot of that into now my course, my product. Even though I didn't graduate, I'm still taking what I learned and pivoting to the next thing. So I think that power to pivot and iterate is so, so important. And the coolest part to me about the personal brand is you're allowed to pivot, right? Like I'm thinking about Dan Koch, started as a web designer. Now he's like leading the entire creator economy and personal development and spirituality, right? So that ability to pivot onto your personal brand is so, so powerful. And something that I
Can I just
noticed,
add one little thing
yeah,
there
yeah, yeah.
is you say like I had to start from zero when I did the pivot on X. It's like, well, I had like 15,000 followers, so that's good. Even though like pretty much all of them were there for crypto, there was a subsect of people, like probably a couple thousand people that watched the way that I handled the adversity from the shit I was getting from some of the higher ups in the community. And it made them like me a lot more because I would literally get on a space. I would make a video. I would confront it head on. I would give timestamp details of this is what I was thinking when I put this out, and this is why I did it. And all these other guys, all they did was talk shit anonymously on a forum where I went out in front and I basically owned it. I said why I did what I did. I opened up for questions and I made it obvious that like I'm very thoughtful about the way that I go about things. And so even when I pivoted my content, to your point, like personal brand allows you to pivot because there are people that will ride and die for you if you are truly putting yourself out there and you stand behind your ideas and you treat people with respect and you have good intentions. People feel that. And then it allows you, they follow you wherever you go. It's like that 1,000 fans kind of thing where it's like those people will fuck with you if you are continually providing value, and that can be value in any way.
100%. And people can become interested in different things, right? If you're interested in crypto, there's probably an overarching interest in personal freedom, right? And now that's translating into your new brand. And something I'm noticing about you is whatever you do, you're going all the way. You're going 100%. You're obsessed. And I asked you, I think I might have texted you about this a couple weeks ago, like, how do you stay on top of everything? Like, you're always in spaces. You're very quick with your replies on Twitter. You're always on the timeline. You're very quick with your replies in Telegram messages, etc. And I asked you how you did it, and you said I'm addicted. And I found that really fascinating because that's that common thread of obsession that seems like that fuels everybody. But my question to you about that addiction or about that obsession with this game that we're playing is how do you make sure that that addiction doesn't cross into unhealthy territory where it can actually be detrimental for you and your mental health and all of that?
Yeah, that's the line, right? And because obsession and addiction, there's a fine line. And I'm okay with some levels of addiction, except to your point, when does it make it unhealthy? And there was a period of time where my sleep got really fucked up. And it wasn't even that I was staying up late. It was that I was waking up in the middle of the night and I had so many ideas that I would open up my phone and I would just start writing tweets for 2 hours at 3 in the morning. And then I would go to bed and then I would wake up at 7 a.m. and I would be like, okay, it's like almost time to post, but I'll go back to bed for a little bit. But then my mind was racing, or then I'd see a space and I'd turn it on because my friend was and it's like now I'm up and it's like I got I got 7 hours of sleep, but I was 2 hours of it when I was up, and I went to pee 3 times because I didn't, you know, get off the last thing I did was spend an hour on my phone. And it's like that I've gotten that a little bit under control. People were literally saying to me like a month or two ago, they were like, dude, you look bad. Like you look tired. And I felt tired. I felt my eyes drooping. Um, Burnout wasn't there though. So it wasn't like, I mean, I guess if I continue doing that, I would have to burn out at some point, but it's like, I have this like deep love for the game. And I also, bro, I feel like I'm on borrowed time in some respects. Like I just feel like I'm not a fucking 20 something. Like I'm going to be 37 next month and like I want to have a bad girl. I want to have kids. I want to have money. I want all that stuff. And I'm not there yet. And the only way to get there is to build myself up. And I see a window right now. And I'm just like, I'm not going to let this slip. Like I've put way too much time into trying to make money online over the last 6 years, 7 years. And I finally think I have like a bit of an angle. Like I see a little bit of light. And it's like, I love it. Like I love the idea that I can take control of my life. I'm so grateful that I get to wake up when I can wake up. I can make my own schedule. I can fucking hop on a podcast. I can go on a space. I can write. I can like it's so cool. And a lot of it is the network that I've built. And I put a lot of time into that. So I love that too. I love just like talking to people. And I've made my brand like literally getting on a space and talking to my friends like makes me money indirectly. Right. And it's like I'm addicted to that, but there is a line where I think that's the one thing is like I'm still like hitting the gym, I'm eating okay. Um I'm not like I'm dating a little bit now. I actually stopped dating for like a while. I've been going on some dates. I'm like allowing myself to have a little more fun. Like I'm in Miami right now. I went to a festival last week and that was the first weekend I took off in 5 months. But it's because I fucking love it. It's just the sleep is really the one that like really started to fuck me up. Like I don't mind the social life stuff as much. As long as I'm hitting the gym, I'm getting my steps, I'm eating okay, and I'm like talking to my friends and I'm like building my business, I'm good. Just like make sure I get my sleep. That's the one.
Yeah, I think having those like non-negotiables or pillars that you know are good for you physically, mentally, spiritually, that's how you keep yourself in check. But I think when you're obsessed with something, like those 3 a.m. bursts of inspiration, I think those are probably beneficial. And like I'm reading Steve Jobs' autobiography by Isaacson right now, and like he would be calling Wozniak and like the other co-founders at like 3 a.m. And he's like, I have an idea. We need to execute on it now. So I think that's like a common trait of anybody who's obsessed with what they're doing. It's just managing that and making sure it's not going too far. But the burnout piece is interesting because I heard a quote the other day from Justin Welsh, and he said, burnout isn't overworking. Burnout is just a loss of control. And what I've been realizing is whenever I start to feel burnout, it's because I have too many things going on at once and I just feel completely overwhelmed. But when I was getting ready to launch my free course in my cohort and like that was the focus and I was so obsessed with building that thing, I was working 12, 14-hour days, but burnout was never even on my mind because I was so obsessed. It's just that loss of control. So for you, like how do you try to stay in control and on top of things? Because and this is a selfish question because for me, like I always feel like I have messages on Twitter, I have emails, I have Telegram, I have to build this community, I have to serve my coaching clients. It's just a lot. My attention is very spread. So how do you keep everything under control and not burn out?
Yeah. I got to the same point a little while ago where I was like, this is too much. And that's where the risk is. I completely agree with what Justin said. Let's see if I can even run this down. I had like my newsletter, I had my daily tweets, I was researching, recording, and editing my podcast, which was taking upwards of 15 hours a week per podcast. I was I was running spaces every day and I was doing the louder spaces, which require me to like edit audio and do all this like AI stuff. So like there was preparation involved for every space, getting the guests. And then I also had a ghostwriting client that was substantial. I mean, not the most amount of time, but I was spending like 6 hours a week, basically like context switching completely. And when you
Yeah.
just have all those things, and I feel like I'm forgetting something, when you have all those things, you just start to feel like I'm really spread thin. And so I needed to, I finally found, I was like putting out into the universe, like I need help, like editing my podcast. Like that seemed like the easiest thing that I could get rid of. But I'm very particular about how I do it. But I went through a couple of people and it didn't work. And then I finally found someone that it's been amazing. So now I'm, spending a few $1,000s a month on that, but like it's made my life, it's opened it up. My ghostwriting client, I was going to quit. Um, Probably like right around now. But like 2 months ago or a month and a half ago, they were like, hey, we just brought someone in house to do this. And they let me go on good terms. And I was like secretly very grateful for that, even though they were paying me well, because now it's like, okay, I've outsourced my podcast. I don't have the client anymore. Now I can focus on like, how do I, oh, and I had coaching clients. I had like 5 or 6 coaching clients. That was the thing I forgot. So I'm having like all these calls every week and trying to keep track of everybody's progress. And it was just a lot. So now I was like, okay, now I can do the coaching. I can do my podcast. I can do my spaces and my tweets. At least now I'm all in on my stuff. I don't have to worry about someone else's ghostwriting. I don't have to worry about like even the editing was just like kind of mind numbing at some points. So it's like I can just worry about creating, and speaking. And now I'm at a place where, yeah, I have to make sure that I'm not taking on too many projects at once in too many different areas. And that's how I stay in control is like I don't want to have to work for anyone else again. Like, and I know that a lot of people, it's easy to say that, and they're like, "Well, I have to work for someone right now, bro." And it's like, yeah, you do, and I did too for a long time, and hopefully, I never will have to again because I just consistently pushed and pushed and pushed. Um, but yeah, the overworking is not the problem. I like working. It's the feeling like I have to do work for somebody else more like at times when I want to be doing my own thing, and then when those compete, then your brain starts to get into a burnout stage.
Yeah, similar thing happened to me like 2 months ago. I had in the back of my mind that I was going to try to pivot out of my ghostwriting clients completely by the end of the year. And I remember I called a friend and told him that. And then the next day, I got on a call with my ghostwriting clients and they had to let me go because of income problems. And secretly, as they were telling me this, I was feeling so much good intuition around this. And then magically, 3 days later, Justin Scott called me and asked me to join Cortex. And like, I wouldn't have had the bandwidth for that had I not been able to let that thing go. So I think it's just a constant iteration and like taking the time to step back, look at everything that's on your plate and say like, okay, what is draining my energy and how can I bring my energy back to those things that I really love and enjoy? Because when you're only doing things that give you energy, like this podcast gives me energy, writing gives me energy, working for Cortex and helping them, that gives me energy. Those things will never burn me out, knock on wood, because they feel so aligned. So I'm right with you there. Last thing I wanted to ask you on all of this here is you're working so hard, you're so obsessed. So, what does this end vision look like for you 5 to 10 years? You mentioned wife, money, cars, like all that stuff. What are you really pushing towards? Like, say, 50-year-old Greg Lunt. What type of person do you want to be, and what do you want your life to look like?
Not so much the cars. I'm not a big car guy. I'm not a big materialistic guy. I think the one thing I would want is like property and somewhere where I can just like I think about this a lot and it changes. The biggest thing is I want to spend my life with somebody that's like I'm kind of like a hopeless romantic like that. So I
Same.
just want to find someone that's like incredible and I know I will. There's like some things in life where you just like you don't worry about it. That's one of the things I don't like. I just know it's going to happen, but I just need to get myself to a certain level. So I don't really think about too much more than that, man. I think about like just the freedoms that I talked about, building those for myself and then being able to provide that to somebody else, and having children. And I will likely leave the United States at some point in the next year to 2 years, if not sooner than that. And that's really all I have in mind. I mean, making money online and living in the sun have always been my two goals, and having a beautiful wife. And that's really, I don't know. I don't know, bro.
That's awesome. And maybe eventually you'll have your own nation state too. Who knows?
Yeah, there you go.
But dude, this was awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on. And before we hop off, if you want to plug anything, where can people find you? And I'll throw everything in the description as well.
Yeah, awesome. The biggest thing for me right now, like obviously follow me on X, Greg Lunt X, and then my Telegram is really where my community, my cult is kind of coming together. I need to get off the word community because I'm like, I have to
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
intentionally not say it. But yeah,
That's
no,
the
like
enemy.
yeah, right, right. That's the idea for now. So we'll see where that goes. But yeah, we're building the cult over on Telegram. There's like we're making a lot of like there's been over like 2,000 memes created. It's only been alive for less than a month. People are like memeing each other. We're joking. We're putting like our what we're doing in the morning. I'm doing contests and giveaways. I'm giving away free coaching calls, Loom videos that I don't give away anywhere else. It's 100% free. It's in the Telegram. So that's in the link in my bio on X, or you can go to greglunt.com/telegram. And then I'm also building an audio newsletter. So I feel like newsletters are getting a little stale, and I'm trying to push the boundaries there. So I do these basically like 4 times a week. I send essentially a voice note in an email, and you click that and you can listen to it and react to it. And if nothing else, I would advise you to kind of watch what I'm doing because I'm just testing and iterating, even if it's not like something you really are into. It's like seeing what some people are doing that are trying to push the boundaries I've found has always been helpful for me. That's at greglunt.com as well. You can sign up for the newsletter. So those are the three things pretty much.
Awesome. Everybody that's listening, definitely check this guy's stuff out. He's one of the most innovative people I've ever talked to within this space. So I cannot wait to see where you're going to be in a couple years from now. It's going to be incredible.
Yeah, man. And before we sign off, I just want to say, like, I've told you this in private, but I just need to say in public, like, I'm so impressed with you. I'm so bullish on you. Like, everything you're doing, it's like, um, you're so young. I'm sure you're so tired of hearing that, but like it needs to be said because when I was 22, I was just like a year out of college. I had no fucking idea what was going on. I didn't even know like what the present moment even meant. And you're literally like teaching people how to optimize their life performance. You have a podcast, you have a newsletter, you have a cohort, you're working with the biggest guys in the game. You're all over my X feed. You got your Telegram group. Like you're just absolutely dominating, bro. So super proud of you. I'm super happy that we've started to build a relationship. And yeah, this is a great, great interview. You did an awesome job.
Thank you, man. That means a ton. And honestly, it's all credit to the people who are older than me, like yourself, who I could take so much inspiration and wisdom from. So, with that, thank you for coming on. We'll have to do this again maybe in the next year or so.
100%, man. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.